In this module, we'll look at the oxygen system installed on the ATR aircraft. We'll start out with a brief system description. Next, we'll look at the crew oxygen system, the passenger oxygen system, and the cabin portable oxygen bottles. We'll then review the controls and indicators associated with the oxygen system. The oxygen system is designed to supply oxygen to the flight deck crew members and the passenger cabin. The amount of oxygen is calculated to provide the cabin a 4-minute period to allow the aircraft to descend from 25,000 feet MSL down to 13,000 feet MSL, as well as continue flight at altitudes between 13,000 feet and 10,000 feet for up to 26 minutes. Oxygen is not required for flights below 10,000 feet MSL. In addition to these times, there is sufficient oxygen to supply the 3 flight deck crew members for a total of 120 minutes of oxygen. 10 minutes are calculated for a descent from 25,000 feet down to 13,000 feet. The remaining 110 minutes are valid for flight altitudes between 13,000 and 10,000 feet. The oxygen system on the ATR consists of a main system that supplies oxygen to the flight crew and the passenger cabin. A portable oxygen bottle supplies oxygen to the cabin attendant. This bottle is equipped with a diluted oxygen mask. The bottle will supply a continued diluted flow of oxygen for up to 30 minutes at a cabin altitude of 13,000 feet. A single bottle services both the flight deck crew and the passengers. The capacity of the bottle is 2,188 liters. The nominal pressure of the bottle is 1,850 psi. The oxygen pressure is reduced to 78 psi in the distribution system. The bottle pressure is indicated on a gauge on the oxygen bottle. It can also be read on an electric repeater gauge located on the overhead panel. The minimum pressure required for normal operations is any pressure above 1,400 psi. Flights may be conducted with pressures below this value, but you must consult your flight crew operating manual to determine the required quantity for the intended flight. In the event of an overpressure on either side of the pressure reducer, the content of the bottle will be discharged through a port located just forward of the main cargo door. The blowout disc needs to be checked during the pre-flight inspection to ensure that an overpressurization has not occurred. A normal disc will appear green. Oxygen from the bottle is distributed to the flight crew through a main supply valve. A passenger supply valve located downstream of the main supply valve controls the distribution of oxygen to the passenger oxygen system. The main supply valve is open when the main supply push button on the oxygen panel is in the in position. Once the valve opens, reduced pressure oxygen is available to the flight crew and passenger oxygen system. The flight deck receives oxygen through quick downing masks. These oxygen masks are stowed in a receptacle adjacent to each pilot seat. The flight crew oxygen mask is designed so they can be donned with one hand. In order to don the mask, squeeze the 2 red tabs together and pull the mask out of its container. Oxygen pressure is used to inflate the harness. Squeezing the red tabs will inflate the harness, but not until the mask is removed from the receptacle. Once the mask is placed over the nose and mouth, release the 2 tabs and oxygen pressure is removed from the harness. The harness collapses and maintains the mask in place. The additional crew member mask has a lengthened tube to allow the observer to reach the cargo compartment. The crew oxygen container compartment has 2 hinged doors that allow easy removal of the mask. The left door has a mechanical switch that allows oxygen flow when the door is opened. The switch also automatically activates the mask microphone and disables the boom microphone. When oxygen is flowing to the mask, there is a blinker disc on top of the mask compartment which turns yellow. When oxygen stops flowing, the blinker turns dark. Once the oxygen mask is out of its stowage box, the boom microphone function can be recovered by closing the oxygen mask container doors. The oxygen on blinker indicator will appear. The oxygen flow is interrupted by pressing and releasing the reset test switch. Once interrupted, the oxygen on indicator disappears. Oxygen is distributed to the passenger oxygen system by opening the passenger supply valve. This valve is opened when the passenger supply push button is in. When the passenger supply valve is open, the on light in the push button illuminates blue. Oxygen is distributed to the passenger through oxygen ports located below the cabin overhead racks once the passenger supply valve is open. The passenger oxygen masks must be passed out by the flight attendant. Masks are provided for 25% of the cabin occupants. The masks are stowed in the overhead bin in the aft of the cabin. The masks have a reservoir bag that fills up with oxygen continuously. During inhalation, oxygen flows into the mask until the bag is emptied. Then, cabin air is inhaled. During exhalation, oxygen stops flowing to the mask while the reservoir bag is refilled and exhaled air goes out the mask vents. Each supply hose has a flow indicator for visual check of oxygen flow. A portable oxygen bottle at the cabin attendant station supplies oxygen to the cabin attendant. This bottle is equipped with a full-face mask and a continuous flow oxygen mask. The portable system mask can be used for periods of depressurization or for medical purposes. It can be connected to the cylinder when required. The flow of oxygen to the flight crew and passengers is controlled by the oxygen panel located on the flight deck overhead. The main supply valve is controlled by the main supply push button. When the main supply push button is in, low-pressure oxygen is available to the flight crew masks and the passenger supply valve. Click on the main supply push button to continue. When the main supply push button is released out, the main supply valve closes and the off light illuminates white. The low-pressure light illuminates amber when the pressure downstream of the pressure reducer is below 50 psi. In addition, a single chime will sound, the oxygen light illuminates on the crew alerting panel, and the master caution lights on the flight instrument panel flash amber. The passenger supply valve is controlled by the passenger supply push button, also located on the oxygen panel. When the passenger supply push button is in, the passenger supply valve is opened downstream of the crew supply valve and the blue on light is illuminated. Releasing the push button closes the passenger supply valve. The crew oxygen mask consists of two red release tabs, a blinker, a N100% rocker switch, and a reset test slide switch. Squeezing the two red tabs unlocks the stowage doors and supplies pressurized oxygen to inflate the mask harness. The blinker displays a yellow cross when oxygen is flowing. If the blinker is black, this indicates that oxygen is not flowing. The blinker will momentarily display a yellow cross when the two tabs are squeezed together. Normal operation is for oxygen to flow only on inhalation. However, the mask can be set to deliver 100% oxygen. This is accomplished by pressing the rocker switch to the 100% position. When the rocker switch is in the normal position, the mask will deliver diluted oxygen. The reset test slide switch is used to test the oxygen mask without removing it from the stowage container. This slide switch is spring-loaded to the reset position. This test should be performed prior to each flight. The test can be performed provided the main supply push button is on. Pushing the slide switch down will supply oxygen to the mask, and the yellow cross will momentarily appear in the blinker. The flow of oxygen can be heard on the overhead speaker by checking that the loudspeaker is on and set to the desired volume. The transmission lever on the control wheel, or audio panel, should be set to the interphone position, and interphone reception on the audio panel should be selected as well. The crew oxygen mask regulator consists of an emergency selector and an unlock rocker switch. The emergency selector controls the pressure of the oxygen delivered to the mask. The selector will function when the N100% rocker switch is in the 100% position. The delivery pressure increases by rotating the selector in the direction of the arrow. When dilution control is set to 100%, pure oxygen will be provided to 3 cockpit crew members for 15 minutes at demand flow. Pressing the emergency selector will supply oxygen at full pressure. When the smoke goggles are used, a 0.5 psi supply of oxygen can be delivered in order to positively pressurize the smoke goggles and purge any smoke that may have accumulated in them. This will also aid in preventing fogging. This concludes the oxygen module.